Kendrick Johnson. A teenager walks into his high school gym. 3 days later, his body is found, head first, inside a rolled-up gym mat. No one saw him go in, no one heard a sound. And when his body was opened, what they found was more horrifying than anyone expected. January 10, 2013, Valdosta, Georgia. Kendrick Johnson, a 17-year-old high school student, walks through the front doors of Lowndes High School. He's quiet, athletic, well-liked. He plays football, he runs track, he dreams of going pro one day. It was a normal Thursday. He went to his classes, he smiled at his friends, and then he disappeared. That night, Kendrick didn't come home. His mother knew immediately this wasn't like him. He wasn't the kind of kid who just ran off. The family called the police, but the response? Cold. He's a teenager, they said. Give it time, he'll turn up. But Kendrick didn't turn up. 2 days passed. Then, on the morning of January 11th, a janitor at the school noticed something strange in the old gym, a horrible smell. He followed the scent to a large vertical wrestling mat leaning in the corner of the room, and from inside that mat, he saw 2 feet sticking out. When authorities arrived and unrolled the mat, they found Kendrick Johnson, head first, folded into himself, trapped deep inside. His body was twisted, his skin was swollen, his face unrecognizable. Investigators quickly announced their conclusion. It was an accident, they said. Kendrick dropped his shoe into the mat, reached in to grab it, and got stuck upside down. He suffocated. Case closed. But his family didn't believe it, not for a second. Kendrick was 5'10", strong, athletic. The mat was over 6 feet tall, but barely wide enough for someone his size to fit. You want me to believe my son climbed in there head first for a shoe and just got stuck? His father asked. No, someone did this, and they're covering it up. His mother, Jacqueline Johnson, was even more direct. This was not an accident. I know my child. Someone killed him. But if it wasn't an accident, then what happened? The gym had security cameras, dozens of them. But somehow, none of them captured what happened to Kendrick. And the ones that did? Missing time, footage deleted. Still, officials stuck to their story. They ruled his death accidental positional asphyxia. But the Johnson family had already made up their minds. They wanted the truth. And to get it, they ordered something that would change everything: a second autopsy. And what that autopsy revealed was far worse than anyone expected.
The police said it was an accident, but Kendrick's parents couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. Something was wrong. So they did the unthinkable. They had their son's body exhumed, and what they found inside was emptiness. Weeks after Kendrick's death, his parents couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from them. Too many things didn't make sense. Too many questions had no answers. So they made a choice no parent should ever have to make. They ordered a second autopsy, independent, private, outside of Georgia's authorities. Kendrick's body was exhumed. But when the second pathologist opened him up, there were no organs. No brain, no heart, no lungs, no liver. Just crumpled newspaper stuffed inside his body cavity. The funeral home said the organs had liquefied during the original autopsy and were discarded, so they filled the body with newspaper as a standard practice. But experts disagreed. One forensic specialist said, "Organs don't just melt away in a few days, and newspaper, that's not normal. That's not okay." This wasn't just strange, this was disturbing. The second autopsy also revealed injuries the first one didn't mention: hemorrhaging on Kendrick's neck and jaw, signs of blunt force trauma, possible indications of foul play. Suddenly, the theory that Kendrick accidentally suffocated in a gym mat didn't just seem wrong, it seemed impossible. But it didn't stop there. The school had over 30 surveillance cameras in and around the gym. Kendrick was last seen on one of them, walking toward the gym. He was never seen leaving. When the family asked for the footage, what they got was edited. Entire chunks of time were missing. Footage skipped forward by hours. Some cameras were mysteriously out of focus during the exact moments Kendrick would have been inside. The official explanation? A glitch. But how do multiple cameras glitch at the same time and all skip just the moments when a 17-year-old boy disappears? The Johnson family now believed their son had been murdered, and worse, someone was covering it up. They held protests, they spoke to the press, they begged the FBI to get involved. But time was passing, and so were the chances of justice. Still, they refused to stop. They thought burying him would bury the truth, Jacqueline Johnson said. But the truth is louder than dirt. To be continued in Part 3, The Suspects No One Touched. By now, Kendrick Johnson's family believed he was murdered. The injuries, the missing organs, the edited footage. But if that's true, then who did it? And more importantly, why did no one even question the people closest to the case? As public pressure grew, rumors started to swirl. Names began to circulate. 2 of them stood out. Both were students at Lowndes High School. Both were athletes. Both came from families with power. One of them was the son of an FBI agent. A few months before Kendrick's death, he had gotten into an altercation with one of the boys. A minor fight, quick, then forgotten. But now, that fight was being remembered in a whole new light. The Johnson family believed it was more than just a teenage scuffle. They believed it was a motive. They claimed Kendrick had been lured into the gym that day, attacked, killed, and then stuffed into the mat to cover it up. They pointed fingers, they named names. But the boys denied everything. They were never questioned as suspects, never arrested, never even brought in for formal interviews. One was seen on camera walking down the hallway during the time Kendrick was believed to be in the gym. The other claimed to be in another class. Authorities accepted their alibis without much digging. No search warrants, no phones checked, no lockers opened. The Johnsons believed this wasn't an oversight, it was a cover-up. They believed the connection to the FBI protected those boys from investigation. They filed lawsuits, they demanded accountability. But the more they pushed, the harder the system pushed back. At one point, the Johnson family was sued for defamation, for naming the boys publicly. They were being punished for trying to find out who killed their son. The people who should have asked questions, Kendrick's mother said, never even tried. And the people they suspected, still walking free, still living normal lives, still untouched. To be continued in Part 4, Buried Evidence. A boy is found dead in a school gym. The official story makes no sense. But what happens when the evidence that could prove the truth just disappears? When facts are buried, is justice even possible? Kendrick's parents didn't stop. They kept asking questions. They dug, they marched, they filed lawsuits. And each time, they uncovered one more piece of something deeply wrong. Let's talk about the shoes. When Kendrick's body was found, his shoes were beside him inside the mat. One on the floor, one behind his knees. Odd, but not impossible. But nearby was a pair of blood-stained sneakers. Not Kendrick's, just lying near the scene. No DNA test was ever done on them. Why? They didn't belong to Kendrick, police said, so they weren't relevant. Even more shocking, a hoodie and a pair of orange and black gym shoes, both found in the gym that day, also went untested. And then there was the pool of blood near the wall, not Kendrick's. No test, no report, no explanation, nothing. The Johnson family believed these weren't accidents. They were choices. Choices to ignore, choices to erase, choices to protect. They kept asking, where was Kendrick's backpack? Where was the footage from the rest of the school that day? Why was the gym cleaned up so quickly after the body was removed? So many pieces of this puzzle were never even looked at, as if the people in charge had already decided what picture they wanted to see. Eventually, the FBI did open a federal investigation. They looked at the timeline. They reviewed the tapes. They examined witness statements. But in 2016, 3 years after Kendrick's death, they closed the case. No charges, no arrests, no justice. The reason? Insufficient evidence. The Johnson family responded with heartbreak and fury. "If you don't look for evidence," his father said, "of course you won't find any." Kendrick Johnson was laid to rest. But his family? They refused to bury the truth. And what they did next turned their private tragedy into a national reckoning. By 2017, 4 years had passed since Kendrick's death. There were still no arrests, no suspects, no justice. But the Johnson family was not finished. They filed a $100 million wrongful death lawsuit claiming Kendrick had been murdered by students at the school, and that local authorities, including the sheriff's office and the FBI, had conspired to cover it up. It was a bold move, and it brought the story back into the spotlight. News cameras returned to Valdosta. Protesters marched with signs that read, "Who killed Kendrick Johnson?" But then came the pushback. The family's lawsuit was dismissed. They were ordered to pay legal fees to the people they accused. They lost their home. Their finances collapsed. But they didn't stop. "We already lost everything that matters," Kendrick's mother said. "Now we just want the truth." In 2021, 8 years after Kendrick died, the case was reopened. A new sheriff in Lowndes County announced he would review all the evidence. Hope was reignited. For a moment, it felt like the tide might turn. But in 2022, that investigation ended too. Same conclusion, same words. No foul play. 10 years, 2 autopsies, 2 investigations, and still no answers Kendrick's family could accept. They believe the truth was never really buried in a mat. They believe it was buried under silence, under fear, under power. "They want us to stop asking questions," his mother said, "but I'll ask until my last breath." To be continued in Part 6, What If It Were Your Son? 10 years. No charges, no convictions, no closure. A child walked into school and never walked out. And the system still insists it was an accident. Kendrick Johnson would have been 27 years old today. Maybe he would have been a track star. Maybe he would have made it to the NFL. Maybe he would have started a family of his own. But instead, he's a name in a file, a face on a protest sign, a question that still haunts a grieving mother. What really happened to my son? His story is more than just a case. It's a mirror. It reflects the cracks in the justice system, the power of silence, the weight of race, and the price a family pays for demanding the truth. People say, let it go, move on. But how do you move on from a son buried with newspaper in his chest? How do you move on when no one was ever held accountable? This isn't just about Kendrick. It's about all the names we don't remember, all the families still waiting, still shouting into the dark. And so we ask you, not as a viewer, not as a bystander, but as a human being. What if it were your son? What if your child walked into school and never walked out? Would you believe it was an accident? The Johnsons are still asking questions. And maybe, after hearing this story, you will too. If this story made you feel something, don't let it fade. Leave a comment, share your thoughts. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to Whisper of Crime, where stories like Kendrick's are never forgotten.